generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
So frustrated right now. I got the amazing Colonel that is backstage for me. Look, some folks, from what it looks like, there's been some Rumble issues going on today. So I'm going to ask for the patience of the audience watching on the other platforms because I see it going into the studio. But I'm going to try to reload the keys. So for those of you watching on the other end, when I talk, you're probably going to get an echo right now. So I'm not going to talk while I grab this. So you'll probably hear that echo now. Give me 1 second. Okay. That should get rid of the echo. And now I'm hoping that this works. We will find out. So with that, I will bring the Colonel onto the stage right now. My apologies, Colonel.
That's okay. Before the show started, Alpha was saying, "Oh, I've got 2 things on Rumble," and I said, "Well, 2's better than the none I had earlier."
I'll tell you
Rumble
what.
changed their legacy over to what had been a beta overnight. And I was not prepared for it at 4 o'clock for my show, and we had no Rumble at all. So
All right.
you got to love these tech platforms.
You were disconnected from the stream. You got to be kidding me. Okay. All right. Okay. Here we go. Well, they can't see us on Rumble anyway, so they have no idea what's going on. We are just going to end that. This shouldn't take me more than 5 minutes, which is totally unsat as it is. But I'm just going to get rid of all these real quick. Let me get rid of the new one that I created, and I don't know if you can see the errors popping up in StreamYard or not, Colonel.
No.
Get rid of that one. Get rid of that one. Anyways, while you guys are watching on the other platforms and being very patient, thank you for sticking around, and share it on the platforms you're watching because at least your platforms are working. So now I'm going to go here and I'm going to be silent for a second to try to create this so there's no echo. So again, my apologies, folks, but I'm going to be silent for about a minute. Well, I guess I don't have to be silent yet. It hasn't created the studio just yet. So there's that one. And there's that one. Copy the title. The rest of the audience is like, come on, man. Okay. Start time. We'll put that. Let's hit next. Right. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to have to be quiet just for quick second. If this doesn't work, just gonna give up. All right, let me reload here. I'm really hoping this works, folks. Going that extra mile for the audience that go live. Go live. It's saying 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's about a 40-second delay. So let me turn off these other Rumble channels I had because I don't even know which one is which at this point, and start all over to look at it. And this doesn't work, folks. We're just going to carry on with the show, and we'll just have to upload it to Rumble later. But hopefully it does work. We're live. We're live on Rumble. It was worth it. Right. Listen, Marine Corps, right? Overcome and adapt. Now I'm feeling fired up because we did it. Colonel, as we're 10 minutes into this, again, for everybody else that's watching, my apologies. Rumble, we didn't start, Rumble audience that's watching, we didn't start late. There was a whole mess of issues, but now we're live. With that, Colonel, why don't you kind of catch us up? We're doing part 2. I don't know if you kind of want to re-summarize where we were last.
I do. We're going to start with a summary. Kind of the highlights of last week. So what we was talking about last week is how the CIA was behind, and it wasn't just the CIA, it was the president, the Marshall Fund, everything was behind the creation of the European Union. And between last week and this week, I found a couple of other quotes that I think is relevant in the summary to get into the creation of the euro, which is going to be kind of new territory. So in review, the professor of international security at the University of Warwick, Richard Aldridge, he reviewed all of the historical documents. And when I first came across this, I didn't even believe any of this because it just seems too far-fetched that the US was behind the European Union. But he concluded that the EU, the creation of the EU, was largely an American project. His points were the US officials trying to rebuild / stabilize post-Europe World War II had worked with the assumption that a rapid unification would lead to something like the United States of Europe. If you look at it now, you may think it looks more like the Soviet Union of Europe, but be that as it may, what you're going to realize is that's probably not too far from where their destination was anyway. The encouragement of European unification, one of the most consistent proponents of Harry S. Truman's foreign policy, was even more strongly emphasized by President Eisenhower. Both Truman and Eisenhower and U.S. policymakers conceived of a European unification not only as an important end of itself, but they specifically said to get rid of the German problem. Now, what would the German problem be? Well, Germany, both in World War I and the lead up to World War I, was a powerhouse. And they basically triggered World War I to check Germany. Now, we know that Hitler's rise to power was funded by the city of London and New York, thanks to Anthony Sutton. And so again, World War II, the creation of Hitler, was another kind of stomp on the head of the German people with the rise of Hitler. And what's interesting to me about this particular thing as we go through it, is it kind of brings together. So we've talked with Warhamster and I's show about the rise of the Fabian Society and socialism, and that they forecasted all socialism eventually leads to communism, which is why I think the Soviet Union of Europe is probably the end state. But it also brings in the CIA and their role behind the scenes, and the Gladio piece of it, which was created through covert funding of the Marshall Plan. So this story kind of brings all of those pieces into one story, which is why I found it so fascinating. So what we established last week was that U.S. covert operations in post-war Europe, think Gladio, the creation of NATO, which was largely staffed on the civilian side with former Nazis. And on the military side, Eisenhower was the first commander. So that's all very, very important. Okay. So the covert operations was used to fund that thing called the European movement that we talked about last week. The European movement was an umbrella organization that led to organizations that all converged for the rapid unification of Europe, focusing efforts on the Council of Europe, we talked about last week, which involved Winston Churchill, Paul Henry Spaak, Konrad Adenauer, who has his own Nazi legacy, Leon Blum, and Alcide de Gasperi. Those were considered the 5 presidents of honor of this collective that was going to be used with Marshall funds and covert funding. There was millions of dollars pumped into this European movement from 1949 to 1960. And most of that money, if you remember, it was called the Schuman Plan, and the European Defense Community and the European Assembly. So all of those things were being covertly funded by US. And we established last week that as much as 2/3 of the money was coming from American taxpayers covertly. The conduit was called the American Committee on United Europe, ACUE. It was directed by senior figures in the American intelligence community. It was organized in 1949 by Allen Dulles. He was on a committee supposedly reviewing how the Central Intelligence Agency was going to be organized as part of a National Security Council initiative. Also, that's where we found Wild Bill Donovan. He also was on that same committee. The International Organizations Division, which was a newly established branch of the CIA, was also involved. The effort was channeled through the National Committee for a Free Europe, later known as Free Europe Committee. That committee controlled Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, which were all CIA fronts. Most of the work was done by exile groups from Eastern Europe, all Nazi-related, fascist, and coordinated out of the CIA's Munich station. The ACUE and its short-lived predecessor, America and Free Committees, were established in 1948 and 49. This was one of the examples is the National Committee for Free Europe, later called Free Europe Committee, and Free Asia Committee, because we were doing it in both places. The Free Asia Committee turned into the Asia Foundation. It was later outed as a CIA front as well. So Free Europe Committee, formed in 1948, was ran by Joseph Grew. George Kennan appointed him. He also worked closely with the CIA. Their campaign was kept alive, the liberation of Eastern Europe. That effort was led by the American military governor in Germany, General Lucius Clay. The initial members was Assistant Secretary of State Burrell Allen Dulles and Frederick Dolbear. Okay, so the United States persuaded Britain and France to give the exile groups associate membership in the Council of Europe. A year later, the White House endorsed State Department plans to accelerate these efforts, outlining their proposal. And this is where we get to the point where all of the Eastern European countries were always part of this unified Europe plan. So people like to say today that the promises that were made in the 1990s that we were never going to move east, right? NATO was never going to move east. That's a lie. They were talking about doing this as early as the 1940s. It was always the plan. And this is the evidence that it was always the plan. And so,
could you kind of incorporate into that argument? It's exactly what we're kind of seeing in Ukraine right now between Ukraine and Russia.
100%, because Ukrainian exile community was part and parcel of this effort. 100%. So I went back and started looking at exact languages. And the assertion is made that Congress in the Marshall Plan aid actually mandated a unified Europe. And I'm like, what the hell? I don't remember anybody ever talking about that. So I went back and looked. The Economic Cooperation Act of 1948, U.S. law. Here is a quote: "A healthy economy independent of extraordinary outside assistance through the closest possible collaboration among participating countries and economic cooperation." So Congress passed a law that basically mandated economic cooperation, which is what the EU is, right? Well, you can't have economic cooperation without a common form of currency. And we'll get to the story of the euro in a minute. But that is the actual language that was used. So it was always the plan from World War II until today to have all of Europe, to include Eastern Europe, as part of the European Union and NATO. So a year later, the White House endorsed the State Department's plan to accelerate these efforts. They outlined a proposal and gave special guidance in a paper that was written called The Concept of Europe. They admitted their concern, and main propaganda effort was to ensure the unification. There were several studies that was done that created positive concepts, link NGOs, think tanks, Council of Foreign Relations, all of those. European unity and return to Europe. Those were the terms that they were using. And they were very careful to keep any funding of these efforts by the Americans completely covert. So the ACUE worked in continental Europe during the early 1950s to create propaganda and mass action. In 1951, the ACUE created a unity campaign focused specifically on European youth. Between 1951 and 56, the European movement organized 2,000 rallies and festivals across the European continent, particularly in Germany, where they received the help of the US Army because we were still there. One of the advantages of deploying American funds on this propaganda campaign focused on the youth was to disguise the money from the Americans into the European movement umbrella organizations. In 1952, SPAC, one of the original guys, decided that the funds from American sources that had previously been used in the European movement would now be diverted to special budgets, i.e., more covert hiding. This disguised their source to avoid any accusations that Europe was still on the American dime. In November of 1953, Baron Boel, B-O-E-L, was the treasurer of the European movement. He explained that it was essential to keep the funding covert so that it could not be, they couldn't use the actual facts that the European Union was a creature of American intelligence. So, this is a quote from him. American money, quite acceptable for the European Youth Campaign, and certain restricted activities could not be used for normal running of the movement. Therefore, they created the special budget so that it could all be hidden. As early as 1949, at a request from Allen Dulles, the Ford Foundation began cooperating with the CIA on the number of European programs. In 1950, the ACUE and Ford Foundation were coordinating their efforts to increase the emphasis on European Union. By the 1950s, senior figures who directed both overt and covert American support were all in harmony. By 1953, John McCloy and Shepard Stone, who were instrumental in arranging covert government funds for the youth campaign, were both on the board as trustees of the Ford Foundation. Now, let me also say this, because this is mind-boggling to me. If you look up who was the president of the Ford Foundation during this time, well, in the late 40s, it was Henry Ford II. Now, why is that important? Because Ford was part of the arrangement during World War II. If you guys remember your World War II history, Ford had manufacturing plants in France that continued to run and put out war machine capability in France, even though it was occupied by Nazis. So Ford was supplying military equipment to the Nazis from their plant in France.
And this because I'm not familiar with this, so I just want to make sure I understand. And this was not because like the Nazis captured them and made them. This was a collaboration.
Yes.
Damn.
Because Ford was behind part of the rise to power of Hitler from Wall Street. So then who becomes president? So Henry Ford II is president of the Ford Foundation until 1950. Paul Hoffman, who was an administrator of the Marshall Plan. So the very vehicle they're using, the Marshall Plan, to fund all of this stuff and covertly funding Operation Gladio, because it was funded through the Marshall Plan initially covertly. Paul Hoffman, who sets up the Marshall Plan as one of their administrators for the Economic Cooperation Administration, becomes the Ford Foundation president. He was appointed effective 1950. And so the very guy that's involved in all of this then takes over the Ford Foundation. The Ford Foundation then begins funding covertly the European movement, unification. All the same ball of wax. So in 1953, John McCloy was the governor of Germany. Right after the war, John McCloy becomes the guy that's running the show in Europe, um, in Germany specifically. And a guy by the name of Shepard Stone, who was instrumental in arranging the covert government funds for the youth campaign, were both on the board of the Ford Foundation. I have to say that like 3 times. McCloy at the time was also a director of the Rockefeller Foundation.
Jeez.
And in 1955, he becomes the chairman of the Ford Foundation, while simultaneously serving as the chairman of the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. So this entire thing is like a culmination of everything that we've researched. So this same circle, McCloy, Dulles, Averell Harriman, David Rockefeller, Jackson, Bedell Smith, who was also a CIA director, were all at the same time creating the Bilderberg Group. Which is, of course, another organization that has built the transatlantic collaboration. So,
as you describe these things, this is the visual that I see in my head with these organizations. When you look at it like a cell phone provider's map, and it shows the different towers, and it has a circle, and the next tower has a circle, but these circles start to overlap.
yeah,
It's like they did this with institutions to cover everything.
Picture. That's exact. Concentric circles. And the Mutual Security Agency, which was set up by the Mutual Security Act in 1951, was also put out a lot of literature that talked about the economic and political union of Europe. So it's just thing after thing. Okay, so that's the summary of how we got here. Now I want to introduce to you a guy by the name of Robert Mundell, Mundell.
Robert Mundell. Now, before we get into that, Colonel, I am going to, since we bypassed the commercials and the ads at the beginning, I want to make sure we get to one of the amazing sponsors that's taking care of us tonight. So, folks, on the screen right now, because I'm going to cover my face. No way I'm going to cover the beautiful face of the Colonel, because you guys would all come after me for that. But I want to make sure that this is working. And well, let me just double check. And we're going to bypass that. I'm not even going to risk it because it doesn't look like it's working. So forget anything I said, Colonel. Let's just keep pushing on.
Okay. So Mundell was born in Canada. He was originally educated in Canada. Canada is part of the Commonwealth of England, and that's where the whole Pilgrim Society, Fabian Society, and one of the things that I discovered when we were researching the Fabian Society, one of their first targets when they brought Fabian socialism into the United States was Columbia University. That was kind of a hatching place for Fabian socialism in the United States. Now, we've talked a lot about MIT and the CIA's presence at MIT and stuff like that. Well, if you look at Mundell, you will find out that he went to MIT to get his PhD in the United States. He moves here and becomes a resident, a citizen of the United States. And he attended the London School of Economics. And why is that important? Because the London School of Economics was home to the Fabians, the Milner Group, Cecil Rhodes, the Rhodes Scholar, all of that stuff. And what you find is the London School of Economics was like an incubator for Fabians and pilgrims to come over to the United States and spread socialism and basically an effort to regain the colony of the United States back into the Commonwealth of the UK. So it all comes full circle with him, and he becomes a professor of economics at Columbia University. So again, the hotbed of Fabianism in the United States, and this guy is right in the middle of it. He also goes to the University of Chicago, which was their second stop. A lot of Fabians ended up, especially in the economics department, at the University of Chicago. And so this guy, like, he fits every single stereotype of a Fabian that you could, whether or not he ever was an acknowledged Fabian or not, he fits the prototype of someone you could pluck out of a lineup and say, that guy has Fabian credentials. So just keep that in mind. And what was the Fabians' idea? One world government, right? Through socialism, admitting that at the end of the day, all socialism leads to communism. So you wouldn't be surprised to find out that Mondale also landed at the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which was the economic takeover of the world, and how they manipulated third world countries and neutralists into compliance with this one world government. So the World Bank and IMF work hand in hand. So he also was a graduate at the Institute of International Studies in Geneva, which again is another hotbed. It's like the Switzerland's version of Chatham House, which is the counterpart to the CFR. So here he is, yet another check mark on his Fabian credentials. He also served as an economic advisor to the UN, to the World Bank, to the European Commission, to the Federal Reserve, and at some point to the Department of Treasury. He also spent a lot of time in Hong Kong, during which time it was under the UK's rule. So literally fits every block. So
I'm not going to interrupt you because this thing has a mind of its own. And now there's probably a QR code that's on your screen, folks. So again, you gotta love the way things work out. So with that, folks, you guys know, I'm going to show this real quick. Kimchi 1. I've been taking this for quite some time. Microplastics are infiltrating every part of our lives. And I know the Colonel's like, what's going on here, Alpha? I love it. Scientists estimate we now consume a credit card's worth of plastic every single week through our food, our water, and even the air we breathe. One study found that plastic particles in 100% of human lung samples. That's scary. Nobody is safe from exposure. It gets worse. These plastics don't just sit in your body. They cross the gut lining, leach into your blood, and disrupt everything. They've been shown to alter gut bacteria, suppress your immune response, and increase your risk for neurodegenerative disease, metabolic disorders, and cancer. Some plastics toxins like BPA and phthalates mimic hormones and interfere with fertility and damage DNA. This is just horrible. Even if you eat clean or avoid packaged foods, you're still being exposed. You can't opt out, but your gut can help you fight back. Kimchi 1 from Brightcore Nutrition is a potent ally in this toxic world. Take a look at this graphic right here real quick, folks. While you're looking at that, it's packed with over 900 probiotic strains unique to kimchi and proven to break down BPA, helping you detox from the inside out. It doesn't just support digestion, it helps protect your cells, your brain, your hormones, and your future. Your body has never been designed to handle plastic, but your gut was designed to protect you. So with that, folks, and you're looking, how do I get this, Alpha? Right now, you can get 25% off with my code Alpha at the link below. You see that QR code right there. You see brightcore.com/alpha. enter that promo code Alpha. You'll get this. But check this out, folks. It gets better. If you want a better deal, call my friends at Brightcore and get up to 50% off and free shipping. That number is 888-404-7997. Again, 888-404-7997. You guys have seen, I've had them on. Again, me, the family, we're using this stuff. It's absolutely great. And that link will be in the description. If you're like, I don't see a QR code, that's not because it ain't working. That's because you're not watching on Rumble. So check out that link if you're down in the description if you're watching the replay. And I think we are set up to keep going, Colonel. So my apologies. Let's keep firing on.
Okay. So there was several articles written in European news from a journalist by the name of Greg Palast, P-A-L-A-S-T. He also wrote a book called Vulture's Picnic. In his book, he talks about, he actually calls Professor, well, let me just go over this too, just so we can get the years correct. So the University of Chicago, Mundell was on staff at the University of Chicago for 7 years, and he taught at Columbia University for 42 years. Okay, so lots of brainwashing going on.
It's almost like a military career.
Economics. He refers to Mundell as the father of the euro. And he says that the euro is spoken as it was used as a means to unite post-war Europeans together politically and economically. He also says the euro was invented in New York at Columbia University. Mundell invented both the euro and the guiding light of Thatcher-Reagan government supply-side economics, or as Bush Sr. called it, voodoo economics. He went on to say that like Thatcher and Reagan, the euro is inflexible. Once you join the euro, your nation cannot fight recession by using fiscal or monetary policy. It leaves wage reduction, fiscal constraints, as the only recourse in times of crisis, as Greece found out when they went through their economic crisis. The Wall Street Journal explains that requires governments to sell off government property into privatization. That's your only way out, which of course is what the oligarchs want. So Mundell was known as saying that he was upset at zoning rules in Italy that did not allow him to put he was basically renovating a property that he built, and he didn't want to comply with what they said, and so he was saying that the euro will eventually allow you to do whatever you want to do, and he meant that the only way the government could create jobs is to fire people, cut benefits, and crucially cut the rules and regulations that restricted businesses. He also was quoted as saying, without fiscal policy, the only way nations can keep jobs is by competitive reduction of rules on business. And he also went on to say about labor rules that they basically could control labor unions by the use of these very restrictive. So basically, you don't need to get rid of unions because you're going to be able to control them by this fiscal mechanism. And he also went on to say that he wasn't saying that the euro was imposed on the old country, but that's in effect what they were doing. They were able to destroy cultural norms in European countries by making them a bigger collective. And It says that the euro is fashioned as an anti-regulation straitjacket that would eliminate um, basically everything that a country wanted to do for itself and get rid of banking regulations that thwarted um, some of the mechanisms that the oligarchs were using to collect wealth. It basically breaks down everything and makes everything vulnerable. And the reason why that is important, especially today, is because if you look at what they were trying to do in the early 1990s to Russia when the fall of the Soviet Union happened, that was exactly what they were doing. They were going over there and trying to use some disloyal Russians to privatize things and allow Western oligarchs to basically gobble up all of those industries. And it was only after they got their hooks in those industries that they were basically going to try to suck Russia into this whole mechanism. And the only thing that stood between them able to do that was Putin. And that's why they hate him so much, because he thwarted all of that privatization to the West. He wasn't against privatization per se. He wanted Russia for Russians. He didn't want foreign Western oligarchs coming in and owning all of their resources like they'd basically done everywhere else.
So
And so,
to that point, real quick, Colonel, is that, I mean, in my opinion, and again, correct me if I'm incorrect or looking at this wrong, it seems like that's what Trump's undoing
yes,
right now across the globe. As specifically, we're seeing it in South America, we're seeing it in the Middle East, that all these institutions, essentially what you're saying, where it just allows them to just keep obtaining wealth and nothing can stop them. It seems like that's being undone.
yeah, and it's interesting. The the spin that they're putting on it is exactly the opposite. That they basically paint Trump as one of the bad guys that is like his recent statement with North Korea, and him coming out and saying that we need to get out of NATO.
Well, their I'll call it their contingency plans, because I had a bunch tonight. Their contingency plans, I mean, it's diabolically brilliant, because they still kind of control the way the market looks. They still kind of control the way prices look at the pump, and they are kind of making it look like Trump's the bad guy. And the thing is we're gonna kind of incur these costs as Trump does this, and they know that. And it looks like they use that to feed the narrative of, look, he's destroying the system.
That's true, and he is, and it's a bad system and needs to be destroyed. That's what I'm trying to articulate here. I want people to understand this didn't happen, and that's kind of one of the most frustrating things to me in dealing with this. Everybody has this very short-sighted thing. Oh, it started with Obama. Oh, it started with Clinton, or oh, it's all George Soros. No. Those are shiny objects. Those are the latest iteration. This goes back to World War II, as we clearly articulated. So he goes on to basically say that the euro was intended to impose a shock doctrine straitjacket on Europe, where the big banks were able to strip countries, and Greece was used as one of the forefronts because of all of the stuff, starting at the post-World War II, where we overthrow their government twice, we being the CIA. But they were actively stripping Greece and other countries of their public assets and plundering and looting them of all their natural resources and wealth, which is exactly what we've talked about through Operation Gladio and the overthrow of all of these governments. The European Union and the institution of the euro into that mix allowed that to happen, because governments were then straitjacketed into divesting being their only option to control inflation or make any economic adjustments at all. And that was all known ahead of time. So it was also discovered that in the year 2000 by a financial writer for the Telegraph, Ambrose Evans Pritzker. Um, Pritchard said that declassified American government documents show the U.S. intelligence community ran a campaign in the 50s and 60s to build momentum for a united Europe. And it was in those documents that he noted that the head of the Ford Foundation, an ex-OSS officer, Paul Hoffman, doubled as the head of the ACUE in the late 50s, and that he was actively working on behalf of the State Department. And there was a memo also noted in his article that from the European section that was dated June 11th, 1965, that advises the Vice President of the European Economic Council, Robert Majorlan, to pursue monetary union by stealth. It recommended suppressing debate until the point at which adoption of such proposals become virtually inescapable. So there you have it. That's the creation of the EU and the Euro, both originating in the United States by intelligence officials and a professor at Columbia University that has direct ties back to the Fabian Society and socialism. So this story encapsulates, it talks about the Marshall Fund, the Mutual Security Act, Eisenhower, Dulles, all of those people. Wow, Bill Donovan. You can't at least I haven't in 4 years of research. I have not come across a topic that encapsulates every aspect of the research we've been doing besides this discovery that literally ties all of these people, John J. McCloy. I mean, everybody that was anybody in the creation of NATO secret armies, the funding of it, the socialist efforts in the United States, and then also forwarding that into the European Union, the creation of the Euro, everything. It's all in this one story.
When you look at, I mean, the Ford Foundation one still has my mind like, what? When we're talking about, you know, in Germany, that's just, I don't ever remember reading that or studying that. And I'm sure there's a reason why, because that would take you down the path of these other people that you've known and the associations that they have. You mentioned that the Ambrose Evans Pritchard guy, and I wanted to go back to him for a second, because when I was pulling him up, it obviously brings up the Telegraph, which looks what he writes for. I don't know how much authority he has there, but just to give you an idea of some of the headlines that he's authored or people that work there with him have authored. China steps in as Iran war drains U.S. oil reserves to 40-year low. And then his article, the ingredients are coming together for a U.S. financial crisis. His article, Britain will soon be Europe's energy powerhouse. Trump's eternal march of folly on Iran. I mean, it's just over and over and over. Putin is fast losing the energy war against Ukraine. The Falklands crisis could engulf Burma's. I mean, these are the headlines and the stories they're selling. This is what, you know, a lot of people just say the bankers, and I get it, because, you know, we associate that. But when you zoom out and you look at all of the head table of Gladio, these are the headlines they're pushing. And like you said, Trump is undoing this for them. Their system is coming down. So let me ask you this, Colonel. What is the threat? If Trump continues to undo this, they're not going to surrender. They're not going to come out and say, yeah, you guys got us. We are the Operation Gladio. They're not going to do that. And history has shown and they've already tried to assassinate him, and obviously they're having difficulty doing that. So if they can't get to him, and this is my theory, they can't, and they know they can't get to him, but they got to stop this. What do they do? Because the only thing I can think of is America's not going to start the war because they can't control Trump. So that means they got to get another country to start a really big war.
Well, what's going on right now? Have you been paying attention to the NATO exercise over in Europe right now, where they're surrounding the province? If you go to the map, I don't know how to pronounce the province, but you have on the border of Estonia, Latvia, the one province there, it starts with a K, like Kaliningrad, Alaska, or whatever it was. I don't know how to pronounce it. But there's a massive NATO exercise off the coast right there. In the past, they've done two things. They will try to wait him out. They will try to create stumbling blocks, which is why his throwing out his third term is hilarious to me, because that kind of breaks the narrative of them waiting him out. There are people actively in the United States that are in bed with these people. That's why, and they're in the GOP. This is not a Democrat thing. The whole blocking of recess appointments, all of this stuff, the refusal to pass the SAVE Act, these are all stalling mechanisms. That's one piece of this. The other piece of this, and we just talked about this today, the creation of a false flag. So in the past, one of their ways of creating false flags is to do that during known exercises. When you have a massive exercise going on off the coast of a very volatile Russian province that is basically surrounded by European forces, the chances of a false flag happening during that and being blamed on Russia and then trying to pull in NATO into that false flag, that has been one of their known things. So if you go back to the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Bay of Pigs, all of this stuff, they stage false flags, blame it. I mean, Operation Northwood, written by Lyman Lemmesker, has a whole laundry list, that looks like a whole bunch of shit that happened in the United States, like bombing federal buildings, disguised as Cuban exiles, flying drone aircraft into buildings like happened on 9/11. So that is their go-to. If you go back to European false flags, during 9/11, there was a NORAD exercise going on. During the Boston bombing, there was an exercise going on in Boston. If you go to the tube bombing in London, there was an exercise going on then. So that is one of their known go-tos, is have a exercise or a training thing going on while these terrorist attacks happen, and then you have the fallout of that. So those are their two go-tos: delay as much as possible, get him out of office, or stage a false flag.
Is that why? And I wasn't able to confirm this, but are we participating in these exercises? Because I'm under the understanding that Trump told Secretary of War Hegseth on some training thing that we were attached to that we weren't going to provide as much troops as intended. Are we talking about the same thing, or are these two different things?
I believe we're talking about the same thing. The statement that he made either yesterday or today, I lose track of time, but he actually has come out and said that he's considering leaving NATO because they didn't help him in Iran. That's, to me, just an excuse. We have to get out of NATO. NATO is a terrorist organization. It's always been a terrorist organization. The fact that he's using and he knew they wouldn't join him in Iran because they're making money off of Iran. So I just feel like all of this is leading up to what we want, the fact that we will exit NATO. And I would not be at all surprised if they stage a false flag and Trump refuses to be part of it. And then, of course, we know that Russia will annihilate them. There will be no holds barred at that point. They've already established Finland is in a joint manufacturing agreement with the Ukraine to manufacture drones. England has bragged openly about being a source of a lot of the war material. Germany has. There was a company that was just bombed by from, I want to say it was either France or Portugal, that actually owned I think it was Portugal, that actually owned the company, as kind of, it was a subsidiary in Ukraine building drones that Russia just like completely annihilated. It's registered in the United States, so they broadcast, of course, that they took out. But the only guy that's in the company is a special forces guy from the army, and none of his money. The money was all from Europe for the company. The company is not an American company. It is funded exclusively by European money, and was a subsidiary built in. But they're doing literally everything they can to tie America to this war, under false pretenses, in order to draw America into it. And everything that they have tried to do to make that case has failed. So desperate times calls for desperate measures, right? And they are getting desperate.
Yeah, and that's the part is we have now, for those of you who've been watching Gladio from the beginning, or at least near the beginning, I think you all kind of recognize the patterns pretty quick now as Colonel starts to talk about this stuff. But now it's like, instead of just utilizing those patterns to recognize what that looks here in the modern time, it's knowing where they went in the past. How do we cut them off to where they're at right now? Because we are at that phase right now where they're desperate. I 100% believe that. And to a point you made right now, of once we pull out of NATO, I think they know what's coming, because we pulled out of the World Health Organization. And you just had Russia. I know you saw it because we're both, I think, equally happy about it. Took out one of the WHO laboratories that's there in Ukraine. And well, we're not a part of WHO no more. So Putin's just like, well, let me go in there and just take care of some business. What do you think's going to happen when we leave NATO? They know that. And
you may have been thinking about Trump's statement of. Because he just made another statement of not being in exercises with South Korea.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, when he made that post about his relationship with North Korea,
You're right. That's what it was.
Yeah, pulling back from participating in exercises with South Korea, which again is a huge, big deal. If you know anything about South Korea, every single year that we did those joint exercises in Korea, all hell broke loose. There were all kinds of attacks on shipping and stuff like that over there. So that's different from this NATO exercise that is happening on this, however you say the name of that. It's like Kaliningrad or something like that. I don't know. I know it starts with a K, and I'm not good in Russian.
No expectation for you to be good at Russian. You're good at everything else, Colonel.
But if you look at that province, it's not geographically connected to Russia, and it has been a point of contention the entire time.
And where's it at on the map? I want to see if I can.
If you pull up a map and you look at where it, let me make this big so I can see it. So, yeah, go in. It's down where you see where Estonia and all of those are. It's like right on the. There is a province. I can spell it for you. I know how to spell it. So search on it. It's K-A-L-I-N-I-G-H. LININGRAD.
All right, let me pull this down real quick and see if I can find that for everybody because I'm very interested in that. And it, as soon as I put in a couple letters, it brings it right up. So we were pretty close. So let me bring this back up so everybody can see, and then I'll start zooming out now.
Yeah, so you see how it's not connected
Yeah.
to Russia.
Yeah, you got Poland and Lithuania right there. So no, yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So the exercise is going on right off that coast.
So we're talking about right in this area, this AO
Yes.
here.
Yes. And I mean, there's a massive amount of airplanes, ships, and everything over there. I saw a picture of it earlier. Somebody had put a picture that had been tracking the maritime and air assets. I mean, it's just swamped. So, again, one misstep or intentional.
Yeah. Sold as a
Oh,
misstep.
yeah. Well, and again, this is very easy to do. You get one person that is a CIA sheep dipped pilot or Navy officer or foreign intelligence from NATO officer that mistakes an inbound missile or whatever and launches a missile and it lands in that territory and all bets are off.
Listen, I anticipate something's going to happen probably around our midterms or whenever our midterms are supposed to be in this area. You have, I think, the Ukrainian suspect that was just picked up in Belarus. That was a diver that's allegedly part of the Nord Stream pipeline
Yep.
sabotage. So that's going to elevate tensions.
Yeah.
So, with that, then, Colonel, I'm going to do my last ad, and then you can let everybody know where to find you and what you got coming up this week, folks. You're going to see a QR code for a platform that has done its best for us, and of course, there's going to be some glitches along the way, but it's only because they're trying to improve things, folks. So be patient. Rumble Wallet. We hear a lot about crypto, but here's the part most people miss. Crypto was created so that you could actually own and control your money. After the 2008 financial crisis, Bitcoin was designed as an alternative to banks. So instead of a bank holding your money, delaying transfers, or limiting access, you're in control. And if you've ever had to wait for a transfer to clear, you have felt that problem. Now, fast forward today. Everybody has heard of crypto, but getting started still feels complicated. That's exactly why I and so many others use the Rumble wallet. It takes all that complexity and it makes it simple. Choose what you want: Bitcoin, dollar backed stable coins, or even digital gold backed by real gold. No complicated setup. It connects with MoonPay so that you can use your credit card, debit card, or bank and be up and running in minutes. Once you're set up, you can even support your favorite Rumble creators like me or the Colonel directly. So do this now. Scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description and download the Rumble wallet. From there, you can set up your wallet, tap buy, and you're in the game in just a few minutes. You can go from hearing about crypto to actually owning some. Colonel, you got some work that you've been working on. You do some really cool stuff with Warhamster. What do you got coming?
So, Warhamster and I do our show on Friday at noon, and we've been kind of tracking back to from the early 1800s all the way forward. We're at World War One, talking about Churchill, the Pilgrim Society, and rolling in the Fabian Society. We did a whole bunch of shows on it, and it's been very interesting. Again, coming across topics like this that kind of meld all of that information with our Gladio piece as well. And then I do my 4 o'clock Rumble, except for today, and X Spaces. And we're going over The Kill Zone by Craig Roberts, that talks about basically the whole JFK assassination, what was going on. We just finished the chapters on Richard Nixon, the real story, not the story you've been told about him, and all of his shady dealings, and basically being owned by the Rockefellers. So it's just been a very interesting last several weeks of coming. And I spoke with Craig Roberts on the phone for about an hour and a half, the author, because we also did his book, The Medusa Files. And that was fascinating. And so eventually, after we finish this book, The Kill Zone, I'm going to have him on my show. So, and I can't wait for that. He's such an awesome guy. Former Marine, which is kind of like my thing now. I've somehow collected all of these Marines into my orbit, but he also spent decades as a Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was one of the investigators on the Oklahoma bombing. And so the man is just a wealth of knowledge. He knows all about Gladio and everything else. So,
well, once a Marine, always a Marine.
correct. I fixed that. Not former Marine.
But no, when you described them to me, you know, the guy's resumes is absolutely impressive. As a matter of fact, I think even my words were like, that is like a real legit badass right there.
Yeah. He was a Marine sniper in Vietnam.
I look forward to that show, and we'll go from there. Folks, again, listen, we're live, and when there's live, there's going to be hiccups. So thank you for having patience and sticking around. But do me a solid. You guys see that Gladio is getting more common. When you guys go out there and do posts, don't forget to do the hashtags. Hashtag Operation Gladio. Make sure you tag the Colonel and share this out. Again, the deep state does not want people to know about Operation Gladio. Because the more people that know about it, the more people that are going to be able to say, I've seen that before and I've studied it before. And then they lose their ability to have the veil over everybody's eyes. That part is on you. Colonel teaches us. She brings the receipts. Now it's your part. So with that, folks, good night. God bless and semper